It is now my great pleasure to welcome Flight Lieutenant Sue Freeman to come and talk to us. Sue was here 2 years ago, and ever since then I've had requests to please get Sue back. So here she is.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me back. So this is Sue Freeman Part 2. Now, there are a number of faces that I do recognise from when I was here 2 years ago. So when Steve contacted me, he said, do you have another presentation that you could give? And I said, no, I'm very much a one-trick pony, I'm afraid. And his response was, anything. Just, you could read from the newspaper, which I think we quoted earlier on. That said, though, what I have decided to do is pretty much, for those of you that didn't see the presentation 2 years ago, a very quick recap, and with a little bit of, hey, this is what's changed since I spoke to you 2 years ago, and then followed by you guys running this presentation. So you need to ask me anything that you want to know. The real issue I have with doing presentations here is you make me stand on the spot because of these cameras, which is really painful for me. So at any time, if I step away from the microphone and I'm difficult to hear, then just start waving at me in the back, and I'll realise what I've done. I've moved, and Stan will shoot me. Right, so starting off, when I was here 2 years ago, it was Movember, and you've already all seen this photograph already. So there were my Movember nails, although I think I can grow a moustache now, but I shouldn't. But my Movember nails were taken off pretty much 3 days after I gave that presentation to my great delight. I haven't got them this year. I'm on a different squadron this year, so these are a one and only. So moving on. For those of you that weren't aware, I'm Flight Lieutenant Sue Freeman, have been Squadron Leader Sue Freeman many times. I'm rank flexible, and I'm more a specialist in my role. I rely on force of personality versus rank, and I find it a lot more effective. So I joined the Air Force 33 years ago, and it wasn't the Australian Air Force, it was the UK Royal Air Force. And I never knew I wanted to fly. Flying was something that other people did, and I fell into it. And I wouldn't have changed anything since I started. I'm from an army family, and they couldn't really understand why the RAAF, why not the army. I didn't want to drive a tank, I didn't want to be shot at. I did end up driving a kind of tank, and I did end up getting shot at. So how little you know when you're 19. But so I first joined and did all the relevant tests and what have you, and managed to fool them into believing that, hey, there may be some potential here. So without having flown anything before in my life and never taking a flying lesson, in fact I've spent zero money on flying, which I know a lot of you are going to find abhorrent, but they put me on one of these. So this is the Royal Aero Club. It is. It's a chipmunk, yeah. Queen of the skies. Who's ground looped a tail dragger in this room? Yeah, nice. It's an exclusive club, huh? Yeah, I've ground looped this a number of times when I was 19. Hey, it was a great little aeroplane. It had 6 shotgun cartridges to start the engine. I think about that now, and it's quite horrific. And it will do anything, and it's extremely forgiving, except for the poor landings. We used to land on grass in Lincolnshire, and had a fabulous time. Learned to drink a lot of beer, and I was probably the only girl on this course. So I started kind of fitting in with my male colleagues pretty early. So I got about 60 hours on this little aeroplane. Loved it. And did pretty well, and they thought, well, we'll send you to the next aeroplane that the Royal Air Force has. So this was the next one. Now let's see, 2 years ago, I think somebody got it 2 years ago. What is it? It's a JP, yeah. Which Mach? Gentlemen. Okay, it's a Mach 5.
Oh.
Yeah. So this little beauty, you can see the canopy there is in the open position, and it's actually got a little electric switch, which you pressed, and it moved forward really coolly. Before I flew this, I flew the Mach 3 model, where you had the little handle that you had to wind the canopy forward using, and you tried to do it really stealthily, so it didn't look like you looked like you had electric windows, basically. So this was a wonderful little aeroplane to fly. It would do everything that the Chipmunk would do, and you'd probably do low-level navigation at 300 knots. So loved it. And it would go faster, so you could make up time, because usually my timing was pretty woeful, and so was my mental arithmetic at the time, but has got better. And this was a wonderful aeroplane, but it didn't do stall turns. That comes as a surprise. I think I tried to make it do a stall turn, and that's where I experienced my first engine surging, which I had no real concept of what a jet engine did at that stage. And I think one of my instructors rather plainly said, "Look, Suze, if the flames are coming out the intake and it's sucking air in through the exhaust, it's going the wrong way." So I think I know what a surge is now. And I've surged a number of engines in my time, usually induced by my own buffoonery, it has to be said, and usually preceded by a, "Hey, watch this." So which pilot hasn't? So we were in the JP, we did a lot of low-level navigation, and in the UK we get to fly around at 250-foot minimum separation distance from the ground and various other obstacles, and at 300 knots that was good fun. We did close formation in this thing, which was pretty good with a jet engine and close formation. There's a bit of a pilot-induced oscillation. It takes probably about 5 seconds for this little engine to wind up. So by the time you think you're falling back from the close formation position, you put a bit of power on, 5 seconds has to elapse. And then you think, well, maybe I didn't put enough on. So you put some more on. And then the acceleration kicks in and you shoot forward. Now you've put too much on, you want to take a whole bunch off. But the aeroplane is still moving forward. So now you want to go to idle, and the aeroplane is still moving forward. So you can imagine what comes next is full throttle, and then followed by idle air brake, and then it just goes on from there. Until obviously the instructor says taking over. And I've got it from here. So we did all of those kind of things, and we started getting more into the military pilot flying that we were going on to and our various other platforms. Now at this stage in the UK, they would what we call stream, and they would decide who was going to go to the fast jet, who was going to go to helicopters. Why would you want to go helicopters? And who would? I know there's a couple of helicopter people in the room. Know your audience too. And also who was going to go to multi-engine aircraft. So we had the Hercules at the time, TriStar, those kind of aircraft. And they assessed me as being fast jet capable. At the time, I thought, well, yeah, okay, we'll take one day at a time, and we'll go and give it a shot. Excuse the pun. And so the next thing they sent me to, and do we still have some Welsh people in the house? Yeah, it's in Anglesey. Remember, the trees are only this high in Anglesey because it's a warm-up for the Falkland Islands. So it still hasn't changed, apparently. So they put me on this little beauty. So sing it out, gentlemen. Hawk. Which one? It's a T1. So the Red Arrows still fly Hawk T1s to this date. So you can imagine, it is bent as hell. So this little thing, this will go supersonic on a good day with a tailwind and a stroke, and you've got to talk very nicely to it. When it does go supersonic, it gets control reversal. So if you pull the stick back, it says no. I'm going to put my nose down. I'm going to make you go faster. And therefore, you turn into a helicopter pilot, in my view, where I've got to push the stick forward, and then I'll slow down. So that becomes very unnatural in this little thing. But we start to fly in exactly the same kind of disciplines that we did in the Jet Provost. So I haven't tried to stall turn this, but I have seen Fender, one of my mates knows Fender. He's stall turned a couple of Hawk aircraft in his time and has shown me how to do it, which is terrifying. But this aeroplane also carries weapons. So it is our introduction into how to drop bombs, and they're only tiny little blue bombs. We call them Blue Death, and it's not. And it also has a cannon that you can strap under the belly, and it also has air-to-air missiles that you can use for airborne targets. And I took a real great delight in this part of the course. I suddenly realised that this is actually what I should be doing. This beats working for a living, and I get paid to do it as well, and I don't have to grow up. So that's I think I'll stick with this gig. And I flew this aeroplane for probably about a year, and probably was the sharpest I will ever be. And at the end of it, they said, right, great, you're going to go to the Tornado F3, which is the Tornado fighter variant. Unfortunately, British Aerospace had sold the Tornado F3 to Saudi, and a whole bunch of Saudis had come over from there to the UK, and they were being taught in Anglesey, must have been a culture shock, they were being taught how to fly something like the Tornado F3 in Coningsby and in Anglesey, and they pushed me off my course. So what do you do with a glass-chewing, young, foul-mouthed, beer-swilling, sharp young lady like me? Well, young lady like me. You put me on this. Now there's a massive change. You can see there's no jet engine associated with this, and I kicked and screamed going here. So this has me as an instructor teaching young women and men how to fly what I did on the JP. They will fly on this. Does anyone know what this is? It's a Tucano, yeah, exactly the same as a PC-9, built in Ireland. So it had to sit at the end of the runway when it arrived from Ireland, by the way, because we wouldn't touch it for at least a month because of the various terrorism activities that we were used to. So it was so weird seeing it sat there doing nothing. But anyway, I spent 2.5 years on this aeroplane, was extremely badly behaved, kicked and screamed, became a instrument ratings examiner, a BCAT pilot instructor, so many other qualifications because I thought that they would let me out early on good behaviour. They didn't, so I then behaved even worse, and eventually they asked me to leave. And I still meet up with people who flew with me when I was an instructor on this aeroplane, and I'm appalled by a couple of the stories that I hear about me, but they were probably all true. So, just another caveat on this one. This aeroplane is probably the reason why I'm here in Australia, actually. Without the QFI, the Qualified Flying Instructor qualification that I have, I probably wouldn't be here. It's bizarre, isn't it? The most hated tour probably did me the best of all of them. So eventually, they kick me out, and they send me to the Tornado F3. So it's really important to establish once again, and I'm sure you haven't forgotten it, because I really have to be massively clear on this. There are two tornadoes. One is the Tornado GR, which is a target. The other one is the Tornado F3, which is a fighter. So the target, the GR version, is what's in Bulls Creek, and that's not my aeroplane. It goes a lot slower than mine. It drops bombs, so we call it a mud mover, and it's painted the wrong colour. So not the aeroplane that I flew. This is mine. So this was a Tornado F3. I spent 13 years on this aircraft. It can go Mach 2.2 is what it says in the British Aerospace brochure. I do actually have a little Mach 2 badge because there's only 2 of us on 2FTS that have them, and he's an F111 navigator turned pilot. So there you go. There's very few of us. And classic Hornet guys hate that fact. So this thing is pretty sleek. It has it did in its time before it got phased out and taken over by the Typhoon. But this thing had a pretty good radar, much better than the Phantom F4. Yes, much better. It had some AMRAAM missiles and ASRAAM missiles that were pretty swept up by the time I left. And it also has a gun. I can't remember what we actually called the make of the gun, but that was pretty impressive as well. So we carried tracer in every other round. And that's because our major role in this aircraft is defence of the UK airspace. So I spent most of my time flying around up north, and I'm hoping the Russians have a little less of a longer memory than we think. But looking for Russians coming over the horizon, or anybody else who really wanted to take offensive action on British assets. So that was me up there looking pretty mean. I've also done several international exercises: red flag, maple flag, all of those kind of things. We have quick reaction alert, which is me on 10 minutes readiness to launch at any one stage. So as soon as the hooter goes, it's very World War II-esque with the Spitfires. As soon as the hooter goes, I need to be in the air with the wheels in the well within 10 minutes. Otherwise, my name gets mentioned in Parliament, and I won't be flying these for very long. We did have an interceptor, pretty much, I forget which year it is, but if you Google Tornado F3 intercept Russian Bear, then you'll see this is the first picture that comes up. And this is yours truly, which I'm in the front seat, by the way, and there's a 1-star in my boot, the navigator, which is a misnomer because navigators don't navigate. They merely operate the radar to actually provide you with feedback and situational awareness on your targets. We do the navigating, we do the shooting, we do the planning, all in the front seat. So this was a launch very early in the morning, and my wingman went US and unserviceable, and he sent me on my own just to probably about 250 miles north of Scotland, and I intercepted 2 of these. They were together at the time, and tried to look as mean as I possibly could. Clearly I failed, because they continued all the way over to the northwest coast of Scotland and descended down to a low level and had a good look at the international maritime exercise that was going on there at the time. Pretty much I'm not allowed to open fire unless given higher authority to do so. I could operate, at this time, I could operate in self-defence, so I had to be shot first before I could shoot back. And that's the way rules of engagement go for us Brits. Close one eye, put one eye behind her back and get on with it. Doesn't play fair. So I was on this aeroplane for 13 years, and as most of you know, I married 2 fighter pilots, and I divorced 2 fighter pilots, because, again, it can't be my fault. They're rubbish husbands. Most pilots are rubbish husbands. For most of you ladies, it's maybe too late now. But I had a son, as you know, Will, and he was 19 3 weeks ago. He's on his gap year here at the moment. He doesn't want to join the Air Force, either Air Force, because he's a dual citizen, because he feels that if he doesn't get fighters or fast jets, he'll feel like he's let me and his dad down. So welcome to today's generation. But that said, he does want to join the Royal Marines in the UK. So that's Navy, but I'll let that one go. And whilst he's here in his gap year, he's applied for the Army Reserves. So he's had to take some psychometric tests, and they've actually contacted him after his psychometric tests and said, "Are you sure you don't want to be aircrew?" And he went, "Well, I'm going to talk to my mum." So he has expressed an interest in, he said, "So how long does it take one FTS if I do go aircrew?" I said, "Oh, this is interesting. Well, maybe about 6 to 7 months over at East Sale," which is pretty miserable, but I'm sure we'll get over it. And then you come over here and you fly the same aircraft, the PC-21 over here, but on 2 FTS. I said, "Are you interested?" He said, "I might be." And to which I said, "Well, I may have to bounce off 2FTS and go back to 79, because there's nothing worse than being sat in the classroom with your mates and your mum's one of the instructors. So I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go back. And then when he goes to 79, if he goes to 79, maybe I'll have to bounce back again to 2FTS. So life could be interesting pretty soon. Eventually, I left the Tornado F3, and I was invited to come over here in 2016 because there was no female fast jet pilots and there were no female fast jet instructors. So they were wanting somebody who could really support women and maybe add some soft furnishings to the crew room and on the 79 squadron, and they got me. So the loudmouth, beer-swilling, young lady that they thought they were getting didn't arrive, so they got more than they bargained for. But this is what I've been flying for the last 7 years until the start of this year. So this was the Hawk 127, where we take young pilots off, well, some of them are pretty mature actually, off to FTS, and we take the best of the bunch. We put them on this thing and we teach them how to fly a little bit faster. Going from the PC-21 to a Hawk is like stepping out of a Tesla and getting into a Honda Civic or something, but imagine a Honda Civic souped up on nitro. So it's a bit like that. There are no touch screens, there's no flight management system in this, there's no autopilot in this. You just got to get down and dirty with a compass and a stopwatch and a map. Imagine that. Yeah. So there's nothing fancy in this. We do occasionally turn the main mission computer on and they can follow a little yellow line. They do have a head-up display in there, but they've pretty much got everything that they have already on the PC-21. So I think this aeroplane is kind of becoming a little bit obsolete, but it does go fast. So the Hawk 127 is pretty much like the Hawk T1, carries the same kind of weapons and pretty much delivers 450 knots in low level, although it's extremely noisy. So we introduced them to all of that, but at the same time on 79, because we're old and bold and we miss what we used to be. Everybody was only as good as their last tactical sortie, right? So we still do combat against each other, where we still try and shoot each other down. We help out the SAS by dropping a little bit of blue death on Lancelin at the ranges up there. Generally, I'm nowhere near the target they want, but hey. And we do a bunch of exercises as well. So we'll go at pitch black. You can fly on MVGs in this thing, and we just act as bits of metal floating around the sky to be shot by the F-35 Supers and Growlers as required. So you come home looking like a hedgehog with a whole bunch of missiles stuck out your back. Pick them all out and go and do the same thing the next day. So we do get to do some tactical stuff. But because there are very few women coming through, and here's where we go into the new stuff, very few women coming through 79 Squadron at the moment, it was decided that after 7 years I'd had too good a gig, and it was a sweet, sweet ride. Then I was to go to FTS, which is 2 Flying Training School at Pierce, so same place. I moved pretty much 50 metres. So didn't have to pack the house up, which is good. So really I have exposure to a lot more young women on to FTS now flying this aircraft. So as I was saying, guys and girls have come over from East Sale, where they've been flying this aeroplane. They know how to fly it, and they're generally pretty, well, some of them are pretty all right. And then we knock off the rough edges and we smooth it out a wee bit and make them more military pilots with more kind of military disciplines. So there's a lot of close formation in there. There's a lot more advanced aerobatics, a lot more instrument flying, which I hate. And we do it all at night, again, hate it. And we do low-level navigation, and we start making them operate as a pair. So they've got a wingman, which instantly reduces their brain capacity by 50%. And 25% is taken as soon as they put their helmet on. No longer exists. So that's what I do now. So I went over there as a flight commander. I was officer commanding A flight. That's when we went back to squadron leader Sue Freeman again. And then after a while, the boss said, "So do you want a career?" Have you seen how old I am? So I said, "No, I'm not after a career. I just would like to stay flying." Because the further up the greasy pole you get, the less time you spend in the aircraft, and the more time you spend at meetings and behind the desks sending emails and writing papers. And that most definitely is not my bag. So I'm back to being a flight lieutenant, but paid handsomely to be so. Actually, I get paid more doing a specialist role than I would have if I'd climbed the greasy pole, which is bizarre. And as we were talking, Christy, earlier, it's crazy what you have to do. Negotiate your own contract, I think. But I enjoy this aeroplane because we can go back to stall turns. We can go back to reverse stall turns. And I've fallen out of so many. There's been quite a few young pilots that went, "I didn't know the aircraft could do that." And I said, "Neither did I." Let's give it a go. There's no cartridge to restart this one. It just doesn't stop. It just keeps on going. The thing I have found difficult is something like the flight management system and the autopilot. George, the autopilot, and I don't get on very well. George makes me very anxious because whatever information I put into George, he doesn't seem to do as he's told. And really, it's my fault at the end of the day. What I've put into the machine, it's delivered, and that is not what I wanted. So I end up disconnecting George and hand flying an awful lot. So that's probably my weakness on this aeroplane. But other than that, it's been good fun thus far. Although next week I've got an IRT, an instrument ratings test, so I'm really looking forward to that. And we have a great simulator, which a lot of those things are done in. So where to from here? Hey, I think I'm going to stay on 2FTS unless my son pitches up in 2 years' time. And I intend to just make the most of it. Get as many young women if I can, and I'm now in charge of the mentoring program for young women, which is quite kind of scary. And I'm convinced that half of them, because they're half my age, half of them can't find it difficult to relate to somebody my age and with my background, but thus we'll see how we go. And really just for the next 5 years, just enjoy it because it'd be the most fun flying. And even though 79 has been fun, I've probably got more work satisfaction out of this role, just purely because I've seen a couple of light bulbs come on as I've explained things in a different way, because I am a little bit different if it wasn't clear already. And somebody's gone, oh, that made no sense to me at 1FTS. And I go, there you go. And it's been satisfying watching that. So that's it, pretty much in a nutshell. I don't think I've got another one. No, I don't. It's back to black slide. So it's time for you to earn your keep. Now, I got a couple of questions earlier on that, ask me again, and we'll get you to drive it.
Years ago, when the PC-9 was introduced, I'd taken an aeroplane up to Kalgoorlie, and we had a chat to some of the instructors up there. And I said, "What do you think of the aeroplane?" And he said, "Look, it's a nice aeroplane, don't get me wrong." He said, "But in my opinion, it's too easy to fly." And he said, "For example, what did you come up here in?" And I said, "A Mooney." And he said, "Perfect." He said, "I could take you, give you a bit of a session on starting the engine and send you off." And I said, "Good, let's do that." And he said, "Well, I would if it was mine, but it isn't, so we won't." But he was a great fan of the Mach, and he said, "The Mach is a demanding aeroplane to fly." And he said, "It really takes a bit to fly it properly." He said, "Whereas this is a bit too much like a light aircraft." Any thoughts on that?
At the end of the day, if you take a look at all the frontline platforms, they are extremely complicated, all of them. And so, for example, the F-35, if the flight control system gives out on that, along with the mission computer and what have you, the thing, that's it. It turns into a big brick. And I don't think any amount of feel is going to save you. at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of, hey, there's the light buffet, there's the medium buffet, there's the heavy buffet. You get it? And I go, oh yeah, so this is a stall, and this is how to recover from a stall. A lot of that is going to disappear, and you see a lot of this in airlines now, where pilots are still stalling and causing major incidents. And is it because they haven't flown something really simple back in the day? I don't think so. I think it's just there's too much to deal with, and there's too much to kind of process in a crew environment, especially for you to successfully get out of that. I mean, in most fast jets, we have the furniture explode through the roof. So ultimately, hey, you're probably not going to need to say that. You're the most expensive asset at the end of the day. It's taken millions to train you. Okay, an F-35 is probably 28 million, I think, is the going rate if anybody wants one. But I think as long as the pilot is saved, then ultimately that's where we go. Having said that, there's a whole bunch of crew aircraft, but that is the long answer, I'm afraid. I just think now they're flying. It's more like flying a simulator. You don't have that feel of the aeroplane unless you go back to flying chipmunks and tiger moths and stuff like that.
Like your opinion, in as much as there's a lot of evidence that there's a lot of people. I'm an ex-Air Force, ex-airline, ex a whole lot of other things, stick and rudder. But there's evidence that, for instance, Air France 474 that fell out of the sky basically because a guy didn't know how to fly. And that seems to be a lot of evidence. There are a lot of people, particularly going to airlines, where there is much evidence of a lack of experience and basic knowledge about flying.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know what the answer is. I see it with HUD as well, the head-up display. You take the head-up display and they've got to look out the window and point the aircraft at the runway. Just point the aircraft at the runway. What? Well, just point and shoot, that's it. It's pretty easy.
Air France 474 was a 15-second interruption of the air data computer because of a frozen pitot head.
Okay, that's pretty sad, isn't it?
Sure is.
I'm on 71 course, it was pretty 870 solo back then, 1968. The maximum age group was 25. What's the maximum these days?
Do you know, I think there's a guy on the latest course who is 44.
Really old.
But we are really, and I noticed there's a couple of young guys at the back, we're really desperate for pilots in defence. And it's an extremely good time to come and
You take 77?
yeah, we will take 77. So all good, but we're struggling. We really are, and all three services are struggling for recruitment. I don't know whether defence has fallen out of favour, or whether it's the younger generation really don't want to commit to that length of return of service that you have to provide to defence in order to justify your money.
So there's no maximum age?
Well, no, not for training, I don't think, at the moment. If you can give a return of service, and let's just say you were bloody good, then hey, do you fancy flying the F-35? Because we're short of 16 F-35 pilots that are leaving at the end of this year, and they've only got 60. So how do you run an Air Force at the moment with only 44 F-35 pilots?
Two technical questions on the Tornado thrust reverse, if you don't mind.
Oh, good.
Sorry for that.
That's okay.
Do you know why they decided to put thrust reverse on the Tornado when they designed it? And secondly, can the thrust reversers be deployed in flight?
The actual brakes on a Tornado F3 are, the brake pads look exactly the same as your car. So it's 28 tons of aeroplane with really small brakes, which is a crazy design. The other thing that it has is it has a hook which you can drop, and that catches a cable at the end of the runway or at the beginning of the runway, known as the RAAF. And that stops you very much, carrier landing style. Although we have seen the hook, if you land too hard, it bounces up and over the RAAF. You keep going. Guess you're going again. But therefore, the thrust reverse was a requirement to land on anything with about 6,000 foot runway. You needed thrust reverse for sure. It will stop the aeroplane on a 9,000 foot runway with idle thrust reverse quite happily and just a dab of the brakes. But if you go to max thrust reverse, you can probably get the airframe to stop in about 3,500 feet. But the chance of FOD, foreign object damage, the ingestion through the intakes, was huge. So we used to just, in essence, just hoover the runway or vacuum the runway as we were going down it. So they weren't too keen on that. It was really just a Cold War short strip landing thing. Does it work in flight? I used to think not. And I was told that it couldn't deploy asymmetrically unless you hit an override switch. That said, the counterpart who I was going through the OCU with, she landed, deployed thrust reverse, which is rock outboard with 2 throttles, and then one bucket came out, and we call them buckets, thrust reverse. One bucket came out, and the other bucket came half out. She then went override, and things weren't working too well. All the indications for thrust reverse were anomalous, so she decided that, okay, this is not working and I'm not slowing down, that she just what we call bolted, so full reheat in the jet and got airborne again. One of the buckets did come in, the other bucket that had half deployed stayed out and stayed there for an entire circuit. And she said it handled like a chicken wire submarine. It did not want to stay airborne at all. So I don't believe any of you engineers that say, oh, you won't get asymmetric flap. Watch this. Anything is possible in aeroplanes, I think, especially these days with a lot of the computers controlling a lot of the fly-by-wire systems.
So thank you very much for your talk, very interesting. I'm very interested to know where you first met the JP5, which RAAF station?
So that was Linton on Ouse.
Oh.
And I'm a Yorkshire girl. I'm a North Yorkshire girl, born and not bred. I was bred all over the place, really, but from Ripon. So going back home to Linton on Ouse was an absolute blessing. Love the place, love the aeroplane.
I was a JP3 and 4 man from Syerston.
Just down the road then in Lincolnshire.
So I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about doing a Mach 2 run in a Tornado. And
yeah.
Can Alf and I get badges too, please?
Yeah, sure. They're just giving them away these days. Board, and in the Falklands, and you can go around the Falklands, East and West Falklands in the Tornado F3, probably in about 5 or 6 minutes. So now what do I do? And there's, again, the other Tornado has landed, it's just yours truly, and I had a clean aeroplane. I didn't have a QRA, quick reaction alert aeroplane, so it didn't have any missiles on it. And so we launched, and the tanker said, well, we've got this much fuel to give away. How do you want to use it? I said, well, let's go for a Mach 2 run. So up we went, and you have to porpoise it. It really doesn't want to go. And up we went to pretty much just around tropopause, and then start accelerating, get to about 0.85, something like that, and then up we go again, and then you drop it down, and you're probably looking at about, you're up to about 45,000, and then accelerating. It'll go through the Mach very easy. This thing would go through the sound barrier at low level in dry power without reheat. It was pretty quick. And then eventually, as we're getting to 1.8, things take an awful long time. So we would drag the tanker up with us. He would go up to about 45, or she would go up to about 45,000 and just try and sit there with us, just limping around, neither of which going very fast. And then ultimately you just do a parabolic dive and just force it. And when you do, you have to be really careful that you don't move the throttles at that speed, because as soon as you move the throttles, it will disrupt the airflow into the intakes. It's got big barn doors that come down and really narrow the intakes, so that you don't get a shock wave in the intakes themselves. And then the whole noise of the aeroplane changes. It starts to fly sideways a little bit as well. It doesn't, because they're pretty bent. and you just sit there, just watching the numbers. And eventually, when you get there, right, that's great. And I think we managed 2.04 or something. It was just over. And then both my navigator and I went, okay, let's do it. No one moved very much, and you just ease back on the stick very slowly. And then as soon as you do come out of combat though, and put the throttles back into max dry power, it feels like you've just hit a barn door. It stops really quickly. And then you've got to plug straight into the tanker because you're out of gas. And there's nowhere to go in the Falklands apart from one place. So that's how we do it. We've got to porpoise it and be really nice to it.
So were you ever tempted then to casually go on the radio and say, air traffic control, can I have a ground speed readout, please?
Didn't have any down there. You had fighter controllers, but that was it. They were all looking at the Argentinians whilst we were playing around.
So what's your thoughts about, you were saying about they're getting shortage of pilots entering the service and that, but we see an increase in drones, increasingly more so. Do you think that that's going to be the future of the Air Force?
Ageing fighter pilots, talking about whether they're going to exist in 20 years' time. I'd like to say that a drone can't actually do what somebody in the jet can do. I think there's a degree of judgment in today's warfare, and I think that they've seen with Reaper and all of those drones that it's very difficult to exercise that judgment when you're sat in Las Vegas and your drone is over Afghanistan and you're strafing human beings on the ground. There have been court cases and these guys have been suffering from PTSD. It's been horrendous. I think if you were a pilot in the air at the time, deciding whether to drop or shoot is very much a judgment call, and there's so many variables that can get in the way of that. For example, cloud, and I think I mentioned it last time. I remember watching Eagles, F-15 Eagles, getting airborne and coming back with no payload, and they'd all been over Iraq and they'd all dropped. I watched the Tornado GRs barely get airborne, barely, and they'd come back with a full payload because there was 8/8 cloud and you couldn't hand on heart say that that was the proper target. You didn't visually ID it. So, and I think with that level of judgment that we have, I don't think drones are going to take over, but I think they augment it. So we were talking on the table with the women pilots that's up there, shout out ladies, and we were talking about the loyal wingman, which has now been, and I don't know if any of you are tracking any of these, but that's an amazing bit of kit. In essence, if I'm in an F-35, I can have a loyal wingman which looks like an F-35 next to me. I get airborne, and that thing gets airborne as well. It's got no human being in it. It is just an extension of me, but there are two aeroplanes with two payloads. And in our squadron, when we would see the hordes coming over the horizon, the game plan was always, right, junior pilot, junior navigator, off you go first. Soak up some missiles and keep on running, and we'll pick you up later. And then we would go in. That's what you do with a loyal wingman now. So if you've got two groups that need targeting and they're not far enough away that you target one and then flow on to the next one, then you send your loyal wingman to target that group and I would target the other one. So can you imagine the brain space to operate two aeroplanes from just one seat? It's got to be immense. So back to the question about hand flying. Do we need to hand fly potentially when we're really just managing systems? So no. Long live fighter pilots.
Will AI have room to move in the Air Force?
Oh, I very much think so. I very much think so. I'm not privy to an awful lot of that development, but I think that's proceeding at a very quick pace.
Folks, I think we owe Sue a great debt of gratitude.